I think there's enough evidence for someone who's a willing, rational, reasonable person to say, yep, something happened.
If you get a moment to sit down and pitch your best argument for the resurrection to someone that's struggling with it, right? Tom Holland, fill in, and a lot of these guys probably already know some of the best arguments. Outside of the Shroud of Turin, you said the historical evidence based on the New Testament. Is that where you would kind of plant your flag and say, I'm going to make a case for this?
I'd give maybe 5 core reasons.
Okay.
And what's interesting about these 5 reasons, not everyone likes this approach, but I like this approach. They're 5 kind of pieces of historical evidence that are essentially agreed upon by the majority of historians of the era, whether they're believing or not. Okay, so this isn't dependent on you being a Christian, believing in the authority of Scripture. These are just kind of what historians of the era believe about the events. Firstly, that Jesus Christ died of crucifixion. Okay, that is just one of the best established facts of ancient history. Secondly, that his empty tomb was discovered by a group of his female followers. That is a well-established fact, partly because the Gospels tell us it was women who discovered the empty tomb. If you were fabricating a story, you would not put women as the first discoverers of the tomb in that culture, because the testimony of a woman was worth far less than that of a man. If you were trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, you would have put men at the scene, but they say it was women. That didn't help their cause then. It helps their cause now, interestingly, because we realize people wouldn't have made that up. It's sometimes called the criterion of embarrassment. If it was kind of embarrassing for someone to say back then, it's probably more likely to be true because you don't say stuff that embarrasses you. So it seems like a well-established fact that there was an empty tomb discovered by his female followers. Thirdly, that there were people experienced what they believe were the experiences of the resurrected Christ. So we have the stories of Jesus appearing to Peter and James and to Paul on the road to Damascus. And again, these are generally accepted by the wide majority of scholars. So, for instance, Bart Ehrman, very critical New Testament scholar, not a Christian, but even he says, yeah, the disciples had experiences that they believed were of the risen Christ. Okay, now, he may have a different interpretation of what they're actually experiencing, but he doesn't deny that the best historical understanding we have is that they did experience something. Okay. Fact number 4, people converted. People who had no reason to want to join this Christian movement became followers of Jesus. People like James, the brother of Jesus, who was not a fan of the movement to begin with. Paul, who was going around persecuting Christians, had this extraordinary conversion. Something has to happen for people to have that kind of about turn. Okay, so that's another interesting fact you've got to put in there. Again, the vast majority of historians say this happened. Okay, people change. And fifthly, the explosion, the growth of the early Christian church. This was a movement of kind of people who should have been dejected, defeated disciples. They'd just had their leader snuffed out by the Roman authorities. What happens in that case? People who believe they've had the Messiah and they met a grisly death from the Roman authorities, they always went and found a different Messiah. There were other movements going on at that time, people thinking they'd found the one, and then he gets killed, executed, they go and find another one. What they never did was claim that their Messiah had come back to life, because that was not part of their theological expectations. There was a theological expectation in Judaism of an end time resurrection, but not of the resurrection of the Messiah in time. So this was a completely strange, novel
concept.
Foreign concept. It would have been a weird one for people to have just invented on the fly, and yet they go around and start proclaiming this, and they're willing to suffer beating, persecution, and death for this claim, and the movement explodes. These 5 facts give them a naturalistic explanation. You can try and come up with all kinds of things. Maybe someone stole a body. Maybe, they just invented
Twin brother.
Yeah. Or there's lots of options. Yeah. But I think when you run all of those kind of naturalistic explanations through the filter of those 5 facts, none of them really make sense of them all.
Yes.
Okay. What if the explanation that was first given by the followers, Jesus had been raised from the dead? Well, that kind of fits them all perfectly. And what if we can just, as I say, if we're willing to suspend our, this inherent materialistic assumption we often bring that miracles don't happen. And if you think about it, if there's one candidate for whom this kind of a miracle might have happened to, it might just be the person who's had the most outsized impact on the world ever, who it appears from scriptures was predicted to do the things he did and to die and even to rise again. It feels like lots of things point to this person as being, if there was going to be one candidate to whom this would happen, one miracle, at least in history, it would be Jesus of Nazareth. So I think there's all kinds of interesting historical evidence that actually makes sense.
Yes.
It makes sense to believe. Now, this may not convince everyone. You know, some people's kind of levels of evidence that they need seem to be so sky high that even this will not move the dial for them. In the end, that's more about that person than I think it's about the evidence. I think it's some people's kind of skeptometer is dialed so high, like no amount of evidence, you know, even, you know, Alex O'Connor's video of the resurrection would persuade them. But that's ultimately between them and God and what's holding them back. I think there's enough evidence for someone who's a willing, rational, reasonable person to say, yep, something happened.
More likely than not, something happened. There's enough there
Yeah.
of a confidence
Yeah.
spectrum that we could say, I think there's something that here. And then if I trust in this, then I can trust in the words of Jesus and the ways of Jesus. If I trust in the ways of Jesus, all of a sudden my life is transformed.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to pretend that just giving you 5 evidences for the resurrection kind of makes you a believer, gives you a relationship with God. But it might be the missing piece of the intellectual puzzle that allows someone to then do what faith actually is, which is trusting in Jesus.
Yeah.
You can believe that Jesus rose again.
You could believe the FAQs.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not the same as having an encounter.
That's not the same as having faith or trust, because there's an analogy I like to use about this. There was this famous tightrope walker in the 19th century called Blondini who had this act of crossing Niagara Falls on a tightrope. And one day the King of England came to see his act at Niagara Falls. And so he watched Blondini cross the Niagara Falls on the tightrope, and then he took a wheelbarrow and he pushed a wheelbarrow back and forth. And then he put a sack of potatoes in the wheelbarrow, went back and forth on the tightrope. And he came to the King of England. He said, "Do you believe that I could put a man in this wheelbarrow and wheel him back and forth across Niagara Falls?" And the king said, "Of course I believe that." And he said, "Well, get in then." And that's the difference between believing something and actually trusting, having faith. It's putting your life on the line. It's putting your life on that belief. It's leaning into it. And so for me, you can believe in the resurrection. Even the demons believe and tremble, James says. It's whether you're willing to actually invest something. Will you trust your life to this idea?
And I will say that all of this is much more compelling coming from someone with an amazing British accent as yours. I'd say all the same thing and it wouldn't sound as eloquent. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.